All right, so here is a question that doesn't get asked enough. It's a question that I myself have had, and that is, do rings on your scope, on your rig, do your scope rings actually matter? Now, I'm not talking about obvious stuff like I threw it off of a cliff or, fell out of a helicopter. All of the extreme scenarios, not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about normal use. You go on a hunt, you put it in the case, you put it in the safe, you put it in the truck, you go on a hunt, you go to the range. Normal use. Does it really matter about your scope rings? So stick around right here because we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about, is there a DIY hack that you can do to make your cheap scope rings as good as the expensive stuff? So this is the barreled action for, you have to keep going because the barrel's so long. This is the barreled action for the 6GT build series that's coming up very soon. Playing with some components today, and I wanted to talk about scope rings. I've had an opportunity to get in some really nice scope rings, definitely the nicest, most expensive scope rings that I've played with. Over the years, I've had a lot of cheap stuff. I've had, some stuff that comes in a little box like this that looks like it's got two different types of material used in there. Not sure what's going on with that, but I've used all sorts of scope rings, and personally, I have never had a pair of scope rings fail, whether it's a $29 one or I think some of the worn stuff that I have is like $100, $150 stuff. Never had any trouble with it, but I have heard of quite a few people having trouble with scope rings. For the 6GT, I wanted to get something in really nice, and my friend Hootie Hoo, Adam over at the Hootie Hoo YouTube channel, he recommended I try RPM, Ruffs Precision Manufacturing, made in Arizona, made in the USA, and they've got some really cool, ooh, this box is, oh, we gotta cut. I bought these with my own money. I did reach out to Ruffs Manufacturing and got some information about these scope rings, and we were able to order some in. Nice little box there. What actually is the difference in a cheap pair and an expensive pair, or a good pair and a bad pair of scope rings? You can find that the good stuff is made with 6061 T6 aluminum, but you'll also see that number on some of the cheaper stuff. These have a 303 stainless nut and bolt. Some more about that hardware here in just a second. Here we have a lesser price. There is no indication on the box of the material that is used. Let's see if it says anything about that on. It could have been in the listing. These feel very light, and they actually have a different material that is on the inside there. I'm sure they're aluminum, and I've actually used these before and didn't have a problem with them. On a build like our 6GT, I didn't want to take any chances. I wanted some good stuff right away. I didn't want to mess with an opportunity of a failure. I wanted it to be good from the get-go. That is part of what you're purchasing, a reputable name from a reputable company. That comes with a warranty, comes with some things like that. I hate to say the word peace of mind. I hate that term, but for lack of a better term, you're getting a little bit of that here. But it does go further than that. You're looking at more precision, more care in the manufacturing of them, in the selection of the materials. You're looking at good design, tight tolerances, all of those attention to details. It goes a little bit further because in the finished product, I'm pulling this out and looking at it for the very first time. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this. There's no burrs on any edges. The coatings are perfect. The part was made to perfection. And I know that when I clamp my scope in here, I'm going to get even pressure all the way around the tube. It definitely gives you some confidence knowing that you've got a nice set of rings. In a cheaper set of rings, one of the things that I've noticed, where the material changes thicknesses, that's actually where you're going to get cracks. That makes sense, right? And looking at the design of this versus the design of this, there's a lot less room for error when you're talking about those material thicknesses. We're looking at more consistency all the way around. You want to eliminate some variables on certain builds. Other builds, it's okay to go to a lesser design price product. On a build where you want to eliminate those variables, I like this RPM, and I haven't even used it yet. In talking with the guys from RPM, they've got the Arizona state outline on the top there, made in the USA, made in Arizona. And this is designed to be manufactured, to be tough, to be rugged, built solidly. And the interesting thing that I learned from them, every piece of everything was made in Arizona. They make their own Torx bolts. These are made by them. They determined that the stuff that was available to them in the wholesale market didn't meet their standards, and they decided to buy some more machines and build their own. That's definitely a more expensive way to go from a manufacturing perspective. If you look through a wholesale catalog and you can pick out some bolts that will work for your application, which is probably what happened here, it is possible that these bolts aren't made to the same standard, made out of the same material. So it doesn't mean the cheap one won't work. It just means we're going to have less question marks. Did some Googling, researching to make this video. The number one problem, the number one part that fails, and number one is user error. Guys actually over torquing and cracking, I guess maybe around where the bolts go in, cracking where the material changes thicknesses in the problem areas from over torquing. So that's us. We're doing it to ourselves, the number one failure for rings. Number two failure for rings is scope slippage. This definitely is related to problem number one. You don't want your scope to slip, so you think 18 pounds is good, 24, 30 pounds is better, and you end up cracking something. But the number two failure is scope slippage, and this mostly has to do with two parts. One, under torquing. My wrist is calibrated, and I do use it as a torque wrench very often. In this case, I'll probably actually use a real torque wrench to make sure I get it perfect. This also goes back to the manufacturing process, because if you have any inconsistencies in your finishes here, or if there's a burr or something like that, then you're going to have pressure put in a weird spot on your scope. You could actually damage your scope by what you do here with your rings. I personally have not had a scope ring failure, but I would love to hear if you have. Let me know in the comments, or maybe your buddy had some failure happen. I've definitely read about them on the forums. I've heard about them online, but I haven't seen it firsthand myself as far as a breakage is concerned. But let me know how yours failed down below, and maybe what you did differently the next go round. All right, let's talk money, and then I'm going to show you how I like to mount my scopes up. Money, cheap rings, 20, 30, 40 bucks. I was actually on AliExpress website, and it looks like they've got some knockoff Geisley one-piece scope mounts that are really tempting because I like the look of those. Something's got to be up if they're selling a knockoff for $40, but the $20, $30, $40 is the low end side. The high end side, well, you can really spend as much as you want to on a set of scope rings. These are in the middle, which is where I typically like to land. I like to find a product that's got some intentionality behind it. I don't mind if it's a little bit more expensive if it fits the job that I'm wanting to do. Typically, I don't really like to pay for a big name just to get the name. I'm perfectly happy picking a company like RPM because they're well respected. It's reasonably priced, and it's got some cool features and some components that are going to do us really well. So the mounting is where things get messed up. By the way, we're going to be mounting this DNT. There it is, DNT. The scope is called the One. Big zoom scope that we're going to run on the 6GT. Let's take a quick look at it. Okay, there's the sun shade down there on the end. We might need that. There it is, the One. This might be the biggest zoom scope that I have. This is a 7 to 35. It's a 56 millimeter tube. Big boy scope. It's not any larger than maybe my bigger scopes, but a lot of zoom. We're going to use that. Looks like dial. It doesn't click. Okay, so we just have our dial there. Looks good. Illuminated reticle. Okay, I didn't know it had that. I like the way everything moves and clicks. Feels like a good unit. We'll definitely do a review of this. Obviously, when the gun's together, there'll be a lot of groups happening. So definitely will be a review on this coming in the future once we get it. Once we get it mounted, we'll be shooting all these groups and stuff. So number one, let's clean and make sure there's no dust or anything. This is fresh out of the box, so no problems there. We'll be using the fat wrench from Wheeler in order to check our torque specs. And I believe they actually include a bit. Now my kit comes with a bit, but let's use the one that they sent. We have an actual, I believe it's Weehaw bit that goes in there. Nice quality bit. And let's get these rings taken apart. One of the reasons people choose RPM, we have an integrated bubble level. And it's actually in a spot that is accessible and usable. A lot of times these bubble levels, if they're on top, you can't see it when you're in the scope unless you come completely out of it. This will be in the field of view for you to take a peek and double check that your scope is actually level. That is a feature that I was actually looking for. Wanted to make sure that we had a good bubble level on our setup. Next up, we've got our barreled action mounted in the vise right here, using some little levels to make sure that it is true on here, and it is. That is great. We'll put the one without the bubble level up top. Gonna have to kind of guess where we think that'll go. The one with the bubble level will go in the back. Now your placement on the scope is going to be a fair amount of personal preference. There's a couple of things you want to keep in mind, but for the most part, where it is going to be indicative of where you are. Now, on our bolt actions, I built a couple of them now, and I kind of have an idea that I want my scope sticking out a certain part past the end of the action, and that typically will get me where I need to be on the stock. Now, we're not going to final mount this until we go to the range and make sure it is exactly where we want it, but we are leveled on. We are leveled out here. I've got a level setting on top of the cap, and then I'm also using the level that's built into the scope rings to make sure that I'm exactly where I need to be. That's going pretty easy. We're next going to take our scope rings to make sure the Arizonas are pointing in the right direction. And I put that one on backwards. All right, last thing here, we're going to go through and slowly put our bolts in. We're going to torque them to 18 inch-pounds. We can get that indicated on our little inch-pound torque wrench. Let's go ahead and zip these guys in. I'm going to use a T-handle because it's a little bit quicker to get them started. We also want to make sure that we're even all the way around. So you want to have the same amount of gap on each side. There is a little bit of gap on each side of the ring. You don't want to torque one side all the way down and then have it hanging out on the other side. Try to bring those down level and even. If you think about it like you're putting a wheel on a car, you don't want to cinch down one side. We want even pressure all the way around. So you can think about this like a star pattern. It's not a bad idea. Go to snug on one side, and then you can bring it back the rest of the way on the other side. Now, I told you there was a DIY hack that you could potentially get a little more value out of your cheaper scope rings. Now, this is a typical DIY thing. You're going to need to invest your money in the tooling. And unfortunately, scopes come in 30 millimeter, 1 inch, 34 inch and 35 inch, and each one of those would be a different part that you need to buy. Your money's going to be invested up front in the part. So at that point, it probably makes sense to get the little bit more expensive one where steps like this have already been taken care of. But regardless, there is a lapping tool that you can put into your scope ring. So you get it mounted on your upper receiver or your action, get it mounted. You're going to set your rings to a certain tension around that tube, add your lapping compound, and you just spin it. And it makes a true axis between your two scope rings. That way everything is parallel to each other, it's lined up, it's indicated all in the right direction, but you do need to buy that part. It could be that it's worth it to you to buy the part. If you're not going to do a bunch of these, it would take a few scope mounting jobs in order to make the tool worth it. But that is a DIY hack, and maybe you have a buddy or a grandpa or someone who already has a scope lapping tool. If it's really old, it's probably going to be a 1 inch, and that won't really help you out too much because most scopes are 30 and 34 these days, but something to take a look at. All right. So once you've got them snugged down and your gaps look to be consistent, I think we did a really good job on this one. You can then go around and hit them to the 18 inch pounds. Most reputable scope rings say 18 on them. Sometimes you'll see a 20. I don't think I've seen a 14 or a 16. Most of them are 18. And you can also double check with your scope manufacturer to make sure that that's what they want as well. If you're applying a consistent pressure, that's the key. You're not going to damage your scope or your tube. So thinking that that looks pretty good, man, long barrel. We still got to put a suppressor on the end of that thing too. I think it's a 26-inch barrel. By 6 inches, the longest barrel that I own. Oh man, 6GT is looking good. All right, speaking of building things out, if you want to stay in the loop on what's going on, 6GT build is coming quick for us. Our chassis shows up today. That information is being shared in the secret group on Instagram. So click on my profile, you'll see a link to the secret group. That's the behind the scenes stuff. If you care about that, you want to know what's going on, that's a great spot to be. Also, Eagle Run 2.3 is where all of the build lists and links to all of our projects exist. I appreciate you visiting those, clicking those links. All of that goes to support the work that we're doing here on the channel. And speaking of the channel, coming up on 100,000 subscribers, we got some cool stuff going. There's going to be a big giveaway announcement coming soon. There's also some really cool Eagle Run 2.3 merch, some t-shirts, some things like that. That's actually below your video here. It shows up there on YouTube. You can go over to the shop and grab a t-shirt or some stuff like that. There's some stickers. Some hats are coming soon. All of that's coming out. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something like I did about rings, and we'll see you next time.